Welcome to Things My Mother Forgot to Mention.
The podcast where we say everything our mothers didn't.
I'm Jan, a trauma therapist and author turned rogue storyteller, here to talk openly about the body, aging, and all the, wait, what? Moments of womanhood.
And I'm Patty, an online business and tech nerd whose purpose is to elevate the voices of women in our world and who doesn't believe in taboo topics. Things My Mother Forgot to Mention is the podcast for every woman who's ever said, wait, why didn't anyone mention this to me?
Join Jan and Patty, two outspoken, curious, outrageous women, as they dive headfirst into a messy, magical, and often WTF realities of aging, health, and quite simply being a woman.
From rogue chin hairs and vaginal thinning
to mental health, perimenopause, and scalp cancer. Yes, really.
Nothing is off limits. It's funny, it's raw, it's real talk your mother definitely skipped.
Let's get into it.
Hi, Jan.
Hey there, Patty. Good to see you.
Good to see you. How are you?
Well, I'm doing pretty good. Christmas is coming and things are getting a little hectic around here with everybody, and I see your trees set up. Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's a little hectic. How about you?
Yeah, good. I mean, I'm feeling pretty good. This will air after Christmas.
Ah,
But we're recording ahead so that we can take Christmas time off. And yeah, I'm good. I've got my place. I like decorating for Christmas, and so I've done that already. And yeah, I feel good. I'm gonna take some time off at the end of the year, so
that's
I'm
good.
happy.
You
Yeah.
deserve that. Well, so,
Yeah.
the topic we're going to talk about today is a little incongruent with kind of the
Not so
activity.
jolly.
It's not so jolly. It's not so jolly. And,
Yeah.
there's no Santa Claus to make anything better, but talking about death and dying, I think, is the tough part.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. We're
and,
gonna
I was just thinking, I just said dying. And when I think about dying, I think that's the more painful to see is
mm,
knowing people who are on the journey to end their lives,
mm,
meaning they have cancer or
yeah.
they have Alzheimer's, and you know that they're fading away, and what that is, or friends that accidentally all of a sudden happen, and it's the watching it happening is what is, I think, most difficult for me, not the idea that they're gone. So,
Right. Right. And we're going to do a separate episode also about grief. So talking about the when they're gone and how we experience grief. And,
right,
I think that when, at least for me, when I was younger, and I think for a lot of us, unless we experience like somebody in our life dying early, death isn't something that we think a lot about. Unless, I mean, some people tend to be more philosophically minded than others, and so maybe
right.
they think about death at earlier, or maybe a beloved pet dies or something like that. But for most of us, we aren't spending a ton of time, I think, when we're younger, thinking about death and contemplating, unless we have tragedy and trauma.
Right.
Um,
I was just thinking, that's what's interesting is that things my mother forgot to mention. When anyone died in our family, my grandparents,
mhm.
let's see, my actually it was my brother who died when he was first born, my first brother, and but no one ever really talked to me about any of that going on in the family, an uncle
Mm,
dying or a cousin dying, and everyone's just like, oh, they passed away and that was it. And I think that's the tough part, is that what could have been done to kind of be more available or connected to your kid,
yeah.
talking to them about death and questions like that, rather than just like, oh, they died and we're going
Yeah.
to the funeral.
What did that mean to you then? Like, so, when you were at a young age and they were saying things like they passed away, like were you able to, like, what level were you comprehending of like what does that actually mean to have somebody pass away?
Well, it's something that just jumped into my mind right now, which is interesting, is that the when I was in elementary school, and we're going way back,
Mm.
and the principal of the school died, and my parents took me to the wake. and I was a mess. I had nightmares. I
Oh my
couldn't handle
gosh.
it. It was very difficult for me. And I still remember that as kind of a trauma that I had.
Yeah.
And I don't really know that they were really all that present for me, talking to me about it, because it was just so weird for me at probably like 8 or 6 or 7, 8, seeing a dead body
It was
being.
an open casket.
Oh yes.
Oh my
I
goodness.
know. Isn't that kind of weird? Wonder what
Yes. Yes.
what were they thinking?
Oh wow.
Yeah. And
Wow.
I think, I mean, that brings up a real good point, is that so at what age, if
Yeah.
you have young children and someone dies in the family, like a grandpa, grandma, a cousin, a brother,
Mm.
your parents'
Yeah.
brother or sister, and how is that managed, and how much do you make available to that kid? Or maybe you keep them away from all of that, which probably would have been my case, should have happened.
Yeah, well, I would imagine, and again, I'm not a parent by choice, but I would imagine sitting down and saying, "Hey, your principal has passed away. This is what this means. We are not going to go look at his lifeless body."
Right.
When you can't understand that. I mean, I think I saw my first dead body when I had to have been in my early teens because it was after we moved to California and it was a very close friend of the family, which I didn't know super well, but it was like she was very close to my grandparents. So she was an older woman and we went to her funeral and I saw her body and it was very weird for me. I had never seen a body before. And I just remember thinking how like I kept watching for her to breathe, knowing that she wasn't going to breathe because it was a novelty, right? To look at a body that's just still and not breathing. And it was very weird, but it didn't feel traumatic to me or anything. But I was in my early teens. So
Right.
I was in a
Right.
different place. I mean, I think as opposed to a child, that's a very different experience because I understood what death was at that age. And there's almost that at that age too, you're like, oh, a dead body. Like it's a little different, right? It's an experience almost of like, oh wow, this is a something that you're now experiencing for the first time. But as a child, I don't imagine that you can
Right. I think that
comprehend all of that.
I totally agree with you. I'm just thinking, wow, I don't know what was going on then in the family, but people were a little checked out. And I think that you're probably around teen years. I mean, it's interesting, teen years, you're not even thinking of dying when you're a teenager.
No,
So
no.
you're looking at this kind of like objective, like, oh, this is interesting. They're not breathing and like that, so it's different. And then
Hmm.
I think so there's too much. And then there's, you're not really attached or really connected to it. And then there's, like we were just talking about before we started recording, is at my age, I've had a couple friends of mine who've already passed away.
Yeah.
And watching them go through the process of dying was extremely upsetting for me. I actually couldn't really visit them. It was
Mm.
really hard for me to be present or to want to reach out to them because it was so much in my own face about my own mortality. So
Yeah. And I think, and that's kind of right as we get older, we start to think about our own mortality. And I think, when I was a teenager, right? So I had, based on our previous episodes of conversations, I've had suicidal ideation for most of my life when I was younger and into teenage years. But I think even at that, it wasn't thinking about mortality in that way. It was just stopping pain and it wasn't thinking about death. You know what I mean? Like it was such a different thing coming at it from that way.
stopping the pain, right?
Right, because you're not thinking necessarily like you want to die, but it's stopping what's happening. It's not about so you're not really, I think for me at least, I wasn't facing death. I wasn't thinking about death. I was thinking about life and not wanting that anymore. And so, but it's not until I've been older myself that I've thought more about death and mortality. One of my very best friends, she died tragically. She was hit by a car, a
Oh
drunk
my God.
driver. She was walking home from work. She was well known to walk everywhere for miles and miles. She loved to walk, and she was walking home at night, and the guy hit her. He was going 50 miles an hour, and so that was almost 6 years ago, and and she died. It sounds like she died pretty instantly.
Really? Mm.
Because he stopped. He didn't do a hit and run, which give him, I guess, an ounce of credit for that and being there. But he called it in and said, he hit somebody who he believes is deceased. So that suggested that she died pretty instantly. But until then, my grandparents had died, but I wasn't, they were older. I wasn't, my grandfather was sick. My grandmother had a massive stroke, and then she was kind of a vegetable. Like, it was just different.
Mm.
But my friend dying, that was like, holy shit.
Well,
She's 2 days older than me. And
and you
so
were close to her. I mean, would you
very
see
close.
her?
I
And
knew
you'd see
her.
her like maybe once a week or every couple
Well,
weeks.
so we didn't
Or
live in the same place anymore, but we had met when I was in middle school. And so we were
attached, right?
very, very close. And like when I moved from California out to Texas, which was a really big thing in my life and very hard, she had moved up to Portland. And so she'd flown down to Portland or to San Francisco and drove with me here. And like, she was that kind of friend and we would talk regularly and things like that. And so it was very shocking, right? And suddenly it was like she was 39 and it was this moment of like she was 2 days older than me. Like that it's so easy. It's so to be gone. Like she was just walking home. And so that, like I said, grief is a whole different conversation, which we'll talk about next time and what that grief process was like for me. But there is where death was.
Hmm.
And that like it can happen just like that
It'd
and
be instantaneous, or it could be a
instantaneous.
long,
It could be
long.
long.
That
Yeah.
a friend of mine who had pancreatic cancer,
Ugh.
another friend had colon cancer, and it's just whittled. They whittle away and they get thin,
Yeah.
and they get frail, and just watching that, just I don't I've never been great
Yeah.
being around that because
Yeah.
I think it just is very triggering for me. And I feel so helpless, like doing anything about it. So I'd rather pretend like it's not happening. But,
Interesting.
it's
Yeah.
interesting. So your friend, but it has a lot to do with how close you are to someone. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I lost both of my parents, and I had grown and lived in New England here, and they were all in the Midwest and Southwest. So I didn't see them all that often. And so when it happened that they were dying, I wasn't there.
Yeah.
And and that's kind of how my family system is that we don't really show up all that much for each other. We're not an Irish Catholic family.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're much more kind of like, oh, that's too bad that happened, and so so I don't have a lot of experience watching my parents die, but I do have more, which has really impacted me as friends or my brother, who his wife was hit by a car, and it was
Mm.
a cop that was off duty, and he was drunk.
Oh my gosh. And she
That's
died.
happened. Oh, instantly.
Yeah.
She she was hit, and that was in New Jersey. And I remember being at their house, spending time with them. And then, I heard like a month later that, she had been hit by a car. So
Yeah.
now I didn't have a lot of connection to her, but I can imagine my brother had probably sent him off for about 2 years.
Oh my gosh.
It
Yeah.
was,
Yeah.
and he
Yeah.
couldn't say goodbye to her. See, and this is
Right.
another thing that people talk about. Are you going to say that? Is
Yeah.
being there when someone dies, that you really know they're gone. And I have never done that.
Yeah. Well, I was there when my grandfather died, and like I saw he was probably the second dead body I saw, and he was in the hospital room, like, but he said goodbye. We all knew he was dying.
Mhm.
It was there, it was time, and we were all sort of like, even, okay, let's go, like for lack of a better word, like he was done. But with her, she was, and it happened in 2020, so it was right in the middle of COVID.
Oh dear.
So I couldn't go there where all of her family had moved to Portland as well. And so one day I would like to go to Portland and even though it sounds morbid, but go to the place where she died. Um, but yeah, there was a lot of that. And I think this plays into grief as well, but a lot of guilt. And I wish I was there. And maybe I wasn't as good of a friend as I could have been towards the end of her life, or like all of those things. And there is a lack of closure that happens there. And that
That's
was
right.
my first real experience with grief was with that, like grief I had never experienced before.
Mhm.
But again, that kind of mortality. And I had a neighbor who would become my friend. He lived like we shared a fire escape in the apartment I lived in San Francisco for 7 years, and he was murdered by
God,
somebody who lived with him at the house. Like it was a whole thing. It was, I lived in not the greatest neighborhood and they were all kind of in and out of prison and stuff. But like he was a good guy, he kept getting messed up in the wrong crowds and stuff, but he was shot and killed, and that was before my friend passed away. So that was also kind of that was the first real person that was like close to me that I was just like, whoa. And like there's a weird hole, that I don't know how to explain it, of just like especially when you don't say goodbye and you don't have
and
that
that's
like
it,
you're just like, but it doesn't make like your brain can't quite wrap around it.
right?
Like
The
in
finality of it.
in both instances it was really fascinating. I had this thing that happened, which was like in retrospect, I was able to acknowledge that my brain wasn't able to immediately process the information. So for my neighbor, I read it on the news in an article, and it said his name and I knew his name, but I was like, I read it, I kept reading it, but my brain was like, that can't be that. So his brother? Like, and it just was not allowing it to be him until it finally was like him. And then when my friend Yulia died, her sister messaged me and said, Yulia got hit by a car last night walking home from work. She did not survive. But I skipped over the she did not survive. My brain didn't read that. And so I was like, oh, she's in the hospital. Oh, okay. I need to
We'll see her.
what's going on, what's happening, like all this stuff. And it wasn't until I read it again that it was like, she did not survive. And at that point, I kind of collapsed and was like, what? But both times, my brain was just, it was so, because it's so sudden that I wasn't able to process that
Yes.
information initially. It was so fascinating.
It's almost like shock,
Yeah.
it's now
Yeah.
looking at shock and shock, that's what makes it hard to process things. And I was just thinking the same thing is it makes a big difference if you can have closure.
Yeah.
So when people are dying, you can have like actually I realized with my mother, but she didn't know who I was in the end, but I went and saw her and said goodbye to her and kind of like made my amends with her, and then
Yeah.
she died like a couple months later. But I mean, I think that the saying goodbye makes a big difference
Yeah.
with the slower, like diseases and things that take people a while. Sudden death, I mean, I think that's hard for anyone to really grok
Yeah.
in their
Yeah.
brain.
Yeah.
And I can imagine just how hard that was for you. Like, what? What? Are you sure she's gone? Like maybe she's still around. I don't.
Right. Yeah. Because you can't like the, yeah, you don't get that closure, you don't get the finality. And so it's hard for your brain to wrap around that. And I think what's interesting too is now, right? So I'm in my mid 40s, and what I'm seeing is the same as I'm sure you've experienced and are experiencing is like people you grew up watching, right? So talking about celebrity, and like you're watching celebrities die and people that you've grown up watching. And while kind of on the surface, you're like, oh wow, that's so crazy. But like after a while you really start to be like, holy crap, that's a lot of people that keep dying that you've looked up to. And there's something about that for me that makes me stop and go, oh boy, like alrighty, because and some of them are younger, but you realize that you're starting to hit those ages where I'm at the age where people start having heart attacks,
Yep.
and sometimes they're fatal, and sometimes like it's really, the older you get, the more I think you're just faced more and more with that, because there's more
Right.
of that loss, there's more
Reality.
of that death that happens all around you when you're young. It's a such a rare thing for most people to know somebody who's died.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking of when you said movie stars, Diane Keaton, when she
Yeah.
just died, like she was 79, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that's only, 7, 8, 9, that's 7 years from now, for me. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking, what? And so it does. I mean, so I think though that's what happens when you get into the 60s and 70s is you start seeing more people
Yeah.
doing well and dying because I had a old boyfriend who I was with him for a couple of years, and he broke we broke up, and then he called me and we were trying to kind of reconnect our relationship, friendship.
Yeah.
And I remember him calling, and one time I said, hey John, what's happening? And it was his girlfriend then, and she said he died from a stroke at 50. And I'm
Oh
like,
my
whoa.
God.
And all of a sudden I'm like, he's gone. And I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's what's so hard about the whole thing is, like you said, sudden death. It's hard to really, it's a shock.
Yeah.
And you can't really tell it's final because of how immediate it is. But when
Yeah.
it's a long, unfortunate, drawn out death, you have time to say goodbye to people, and that's
Yeah.
easier.
Yeah. And I think it's hard too, those long deaths though are hard as well. Like I think about my mother, right? Because she's been having for it has been years and years now that she just has one ailment after another, and she's a similar age to you, and she's in assisted living and can barely walk, and she struggles so much, and most of it is external for her, but there's this thing for me where I'm just like I'm just sort of like it's got to be any day that anything can happen. Like she could live another 10 years and it could just be external, but with so much just continuing to kind of fail and stuff, I just feel like I'm sort of always prepared for a phone call to tell me that she has
Right,
died.
right.
And it's a weird place to exist because you're just sort of like at any moment, is this it? Is this the last moment? When I say goodbye today, when I leave, this could be it. And I just don't know. And when the place calls me for whatever reason, my heart drops every time because I'm like, is this that call? And so there's that piece of it too, where you're just sort of watching death constantly. And again, maybe it'll be 10 years and maybe it'll be 2 months and you just don't know. And I think that's very hard as well when you sort of live in a gray area almost, right? Which I think is similar with Alzheimer's because Alzheimer's is a disease that will kill you, but it
But
takes time and you don't know how long it will be before that takes that. My paternal grandmother died of Alzheimer's and she lived a very long time with that.
boy, all I gotta say is someone get me a pillow. That's all. I mean, I'm sorry. I
No, I mean,
gotta
my
laugh
mom says the same
because
thing. We have a joke. She's like, it's almost time for the pillow, Patty. Sometimes she'll
I
say
know.
it,
I tell you, I mean, I'm right there with her because it's like I don't, I mean, now I'm talking about my own death, but I
Yeah,
don't want to be a burden for my sons. I don't
yeah,
want them having to do some of the things that you're doing with your mom
yeah,
and thinking that they have to be around me to take care of me. I'm thinking that is absolutely not what I want.
right.
So I always have a friend of mine. We have this pact about the pillow. So, and I'm like,
Yeah.
so, yeah, that is kind of crazy thought, but
But I
anyway,
don't think it's a crazy thought. I mean, I think we're having this conversation about death, and I think that that's a real conversation that, how that's not something that my mother ever talked about when we were younger. Now, of course, it's something that we talk about and we have those
right.
conversations, she and I, and about, she's like, never let me be a vegetable, Patty, never let me be a vegetable. Like if that's the time. Like
Have that in writing?
yes, yes, yes.
Yes. Okay.
Oh yeah,
So,
we've taken care of all of that stuff and she has been very clear with her wishes and she's like I don't want to be a
sure.
because her mother was when her mother had a massive stroke and they I think she lived for about 2 more months but she was just wasn't there, like I'm the one that found her and she like couldn't she like saw through me, like she just was already gone by the time I found her. And
Mhm.
so she never came back from that. Every once in a while, it looked like she was maybe responsive, but she didn't want to be here. She had stopped taking her medication. And so that was a choice she had made. It was not long after my grandfather passed. And so she was pretty vegetableized I mean, this is probably a not nice way to say it, but so she was not able to move or function
Yeah.
for a couple months. And then my mom and her sister let her go. And so that's something for my mom is she's just like, I don't ever
Right.
want
Don't
that.
give me
And
2 months. Just let me go. Yeah.
yeah, just that's not she's always like, make sure I'm not coming back. But then once you know for sure I'm not coming back, then let me go. You
Oh,
know? But
well,
I
I
think
mean,
those are
that's a whole
important.
other thing that we should say here is that then for those people who are in that journey of ending their life, that to get it together with in writing, in a
Yeah.
will, get
Yeah.
things straight, to make sure that you make clear the people that are caretakers around you. I think
Yeah.
the caretaker has changed. Now they're calling them care something. I can't remember.
Givers.
There's a new name for people who are taking care of people who are their partners that are dying. I can't
Wow.
remember. Anyway, but I think that's a smart thing to do. I mean, for all of us, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
I'm waiting for, all right, Patty, and I know Texas will not be like this, but Massachusetts has already brought it up to be voted on. It didn't make it, but I'm hoping it happens, is the right to have to kill yourself, to
I wanted to talk about that actually because that was something like my brother and I have talked about as well of just like, and with my mother, like not like my brother and I are, let me be clear. But like that idea of we're allowed to give our animals dignity and allow them to go when they're terminal, when
right,
there's nothing
right.
more to be at peace, but we don't allow that for ourselves. And I know that that's a very controversial thing. And I think that people, when they talk about, um I can't remember the actual term for it. It's assisted suicide, but it's called something else. I think that when people hear about that topic and they think about it, they think, oh, well, you shouldn't be allowed to just kill yourself. But the thing is we're talking about people who are terminal. We're talking about people who are their life quality is so poor and they're in the midst of dying that they should be allowed to let their lives go with dignity and grace and not horrifically suffer, especially those with cancer and things like that. And um, I'm glad that there are states like Washington and Oregon
Right. I was
already do
just thinking
that.
that the states that have it,
Hmm.
and that's where you have to write in writing, have it
Yes.
clear,
Oh yeah.
being in sound mind that you're saying
Yeah,
that.
you have to,
Right.
I believe you have to see a psychologist. Like you have to go through things to be clear so it's not just a impulsive decision. Um, but I think that that's fair to allow somebody to have that piece to leave of their will.
Well, I just looked up what you were talking about. They call it MAID, medical aid in dying. Is that what you were
Mm.
looking for, the term?
It's something else different that I know,
Then
but
there's PASS,
physician
physician assisted
assisted
suicide,
suicide. That's what
and
I was
that's
thinking. Yeah.
or physician assisted death and dying, PAD, PAD. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but they're coming up with a lot of, information about those things, and I think it's
Yeah.
becoming a bigger deal because of our technology and our medicine that keeps people alive forever, and that is not always a
Yeah.
good thing.
Well, in cancer, right? I mean, the amount of growth that cancer has spread throughout our communities and the people who die from cancer is much greater, and that is a very painful way to go. And so when you know that you're beyond that, I feel like there should be that opportunity. But there are really only, I don't know how many states anymore, but I know when it was first starting, I was in California and there was like Oregon and Washington were two of the states. I think Oregon was one of the first to have physician assisted because you remember way back in the day, like Jack Kevorkian, and there was a whole thing about him, right?
Yep.
But he was doing exactly that. I mean, it's death with dignity. Um, and so I do think that there's something powerful in that. And I think that those are conversations, I think looking at resources and thinking about it is like make sure you have those conversations with people you love, no matter your age. And I don't think it has to be morbid, it can be loving and like, hey, just so you know, this is what I want to happen when I die.
Hmm.
I want to be cremated. I don't want to like just cremate me and chuck me off the side of a cliff in California. There's a place I like in San Francisco called Land's End. That's where I want to go. Fly away, like my little ashes. Like, I don't want anything big and fancy and expensive. Keep it simple. Like, but let your wishes be known and talk about those things with people because you don't ever know when.
There's a Being Mortal actually is a very good book, and I just
Hmm.
found it again. I was remembering it. Being Mortal, it's by a doctor whose name's Atul Gawande. and what medicine and what matters in the end. And this is another big topic that we really
Mm.
probably should at least note
Yeah.
and say is because medicine can keep people alive, on machines and everything forever. This whole book, Being Mortal, he talks about the whole idea of his own father having some kind of a tumor in his brain. And they said that if they were to do surgery to get rid of it, then the recovery rate would be this, and then he wouldn't be able to walk. And it has all these other things. But we can do this. We can keep you alive longer. And he said his father talked to him, and they decided to let nature happen, and he was gonna and he passed away without any intervention.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a really good book to really talk about it, that whole dilemma in the society today, because our medicine is so far advanced,
Yeah.
we can really keep people alive, and it really should we be doing that, and how do you call that? So
Right. Well, and I think when we look at that too, is like, what is the quality of life of somebody who, right? Because
yes,
in some cases, like maybe, a 15-year-old or somebody who's young, that they're going to be able to have a long, strong
exactly.
quality of life. Oh my goodness, yes. But for somebody who's 80, 90 years old, who is going to go through whatever series of operations or whatever it may be, and they're going to be reliant on machines and a
Mhm.
ton of medication and all of these side effects, is you can choose that if you want. That is your choice. However, it is something to think about. And what does that look like for you and your quality of life? And, I think one of the things that's important to talk about when we talk about death is, how do you make peace with death? And how do you
Yeah,
make peace with the fact that you will die? I feel like one of the things for me is, because I've had suicidal ideations for so long in my life, which I don't have now and I haven't had for a long time, but I sort of had reached this point where I'm like, you know what? I've lived an okay life. Like, I'm pretty
mhm,
okay. I've
mhm,
enjoyed my life. I've had fun. I'm proud of the things I've done. Like, I am at a point where I'm not necessarily afraid of it. I'm not like, yeah, let's go death. Come on. But I'm also like, I think that with Yulia dying for me was one of those things
mhm,
of like, if I go, am I at peace with what I've lived and how I've
mhm,
lived and who I
mhm.
am? And
I like that.
yeah, and I
I mean,
think that's important.
I think that's really important, and I kind of think about the same thing myself. And like writing the book that just was
Yeah.
revised and published is like, even though that took like so much time and money, for me, it's like my statement of trying to, if I leave this world, it's something I'm going to leave behind, and hopefully it'll be helpful to others.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like really looking back and realizing like, okay, I've had a good life. And if this is the time for me to go, can I go? And actually, I'm just looking at his book on Amazon here, and it's all about exploring mortality and end of life
Mm.
and questions asking yourself. So
I
that would
love that.
actually be a good resource for
Yeah.
people who are listening now is to look at that book. So
Yeah, I'll put it
get
in the
it.
show notes for sure. I think that's great. I think that's a great place to kind of wrap up and to think about those resources, is that, that's one of the things, aside of change that's a constant, right? Is that we're all going to die,
Yes.
and everybody we love is going to die, whether it's before or after us. I mean, it's going to happen. And so what can we do to find whatever piece that is, whether that's
Mhm.
religion for you, whether that's writing a book, or both, or like whatever that looks like for you, like whatever you can find for yourself to make peace with the mortality that we all experience. and
Yeah.
and yeah, be whatever, happy and loving, and just live your life however you can, because yeah,
Yeah.
that's the
I
thing.
mean, life is a gift to begin with. So, the gift comes in and then the gift goes out.
Yeah.
So, but I think that, it's just, reviewing back of what we've talked about. I think we've covered like all different aspects of
Yeah.
death and dying.
Yeah.
And just really, we're all going to have to talk about that in our own lives. And for people who are in my age bracket, they should really have had some planning. And, it does change. And I'll tell you, once I hit 65,
I'm sure.
it was not that it was all downhill, but it was similar to your mother. It's like one thing after another keeps going into the next thing to the
Yeah.
next thing. and you start going, oh my gosh, this how it's going to be? And so I really, it naturally comes upon us.
Yeah.
Now I know why retirement's always like age 65, that it's true. Something starts changing. So,
Interesting. Yeah. So it's good. And I think too, like I have a will and because I want to make sure my cats are okay. And I have a business. Like
hmm
I've had to think about what happens if I die. We talked about this
I
recently. Like
know.
I have a little binder of like, oh no, like somebody needs to step in and make sure my people get paid. And
Patty, oh no book.
oh no.
What did you call it? The oh no book?
Well, no, I just now, but it's called my death book. But like,
My death book, the oh no book.
the oh no book. Uh-oh. Bye, Patty.
Uh-oh. Oh no. Oh, I mean, you do have to laugh about some of this,
Well,
but
yeah, what are you gonna do? Like, that's one thing we will all experience. So,
anyway.
yeah. Well, thanks. Lovely
Well,
chat as usual.
yes. And I'll see if I have any other resources that I can come up with, but that is one of my favorite books that I've read and really impacted. We made our son read that book, and he's a doctor.
Oh,
He
oh,
was a
that's
doctor. He
smart.
was in the ER room. He's an emergency room doctor. And during COVID is when he was breaking,
Mm,
he's just ending his internship and had graduated. And he's like, and, I
wow.
think, I mean, talking about that is doctors,
Mm,
you do have to somewhat detach
yeah,
because of all the different people that would die on him and kind of compartmentalize it so it doesn't really get you. But I think when it's someone you're connected to and close, it's a whole different story. So,
yeah, yeah. Well, next time we'll have a guest, and then after that we'll talk about the grief side of death, which
yeah,
will be another, whole other
whole other
conversation. But
conversation.
yeah, we can talk about death forever.
Right. And we have a guest coming in, a colleague of yours
Yeah, we
for
do.
our guest. Okay, great.
Yeah, yeah. So that'll be exciting. So, well, thanks, Jan.
Thank you, Patty, as always. See you later. Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you like what you've heard, please share it with friends, subscribe, and leave a review.
And remember, information shared on this podcast is not medical advice. If you have a concern about your physical or mental health, please seek support from a professional.
If you have a story you'd like to share about things your mother forgot to mention, you can apply to be a guest.
We'd also love to hear a quick 90-second thing you've learned in your life.
You can find links to both of those over at our website at
thingsmymotherforgottomention.com or in the show notes.
Thank you.